Welcome, age of vintage society. Charlie Chaplin's second divorce was Hollywood's greatest scandal at the time. Chaplin's marriage to Gray was troubled from the start and lasted merely 3 years. As part of her divorce from Charles Chaplin, she received $600,000, the largest cash settlement ever in an American divorce up to that time. How Charlie Chaplin's divorce ended with a $16 million settlement. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Funny man Charlie Chaplin had a darker side. Charlie Chaplin and the original A-list divorce scandal. Charlie Chaplin was a genius as a comedian, actor, writer, composer, director and filmmaker, the creator of one of the most iconic characters of all time, his immortal little tramp. But when it came to relationships with the opposite sex, he was less gifted. On January the 11th, 1927, Charlie Chaplin's $16 million estate is frozen by court receivers after his second wife, Lita Gray Chaplin, sues for divorce. Lita was a 16-year-old hopeful actress when the 35-year-old Chaplin married her in 1924. The bitter and prolonged divorce ended a 3-year marriage with a $1 million settlement. The allegations produced in the divorce case are barely a patch on the divorce that shook Hollywood to its core in 1927. Chaplin, one of the most financially successful stars of early Hollywood, was introduced to the stage when he was 5. The son of London music hall entertainers, young Chaplin was watching a show starring his mother when her voice cracked. He quickly shuffled onto the stage to finish the act. Charlie's father died when Chaplin was a toddler, and when his mother had a nervous breakdown, Chaplin and his older half-brother Sidney roamed London, where they danced on the streets and collected pennies in a hat. They eventually went to an orphanage and joined the 8 Lancashire Lads, a children's dance troupe. When Chaplin was 17, he developed his comedic skills with the help of Fred Karno's company, for which his half-brother had already become a popular comedian. Soon Chaplin's bowler hat, out-turned feet, moustache and walking cane became his trademark. He joined the Keystone Company and filmed Making a Living, in which he played a mustachioed villain who wore a monocle. It wasn't long before he also worked on the other side of the camera, helping direct his 12th film and directing his 13th, Caught in the Rain, on his own. Chaplin refined what would soon become his legacy, the character Charlie the Tramp, and signed on with S&A Company in 1915 for $1,250 a week, plus a $10,000 bonus. Quite a jump from the $175 that Keystone paid him. The next year he signed with Mutual for $10,000 a week, plus a $150,000 bonus under a contract that required him to make 12 films annually, but granted him complete creative control over the pictures. And in 1918 he signed a contract with First National for $1 million for 8 films. A masterful silent film actor and pantomimist who could elicit both laughter and tears from his audiences, Chaplin resisted the arrival of sound in movies. Indeed, in his first film that featured sound, City Lights in 1931, he only used music. His first true sound film was 1940's The Great Dictator. Charlie Chaplin was loved by the audiences and by the ladies. Chaplin dabbled with a few different wives and had a number of children throughout his life. While married to his first wife, Mildred, Chaplin was working on the film The Kid. Chaplin's next wife, Lita McMurray, was a star in this film. While he was getting the movie The Gold Rush together, the pair met again and Chaplin signed her to the film. Lolita was 16 years old and Chaplin was 36 when they began to romance each other. They were married on November 26, 1924, just over 4 years after he divorced his first wife. Only a few months later, Lita gave birth to their first child together, who was named Charles Chaplin Jr. He was born on May 5, 1925. About a year later, on March 30, 1926, Sidney Chaplin entered the world. In November of 1926, their marriage ended in a bitter divorce. It was one of the greatest scandals of the silent film era. Charlie Chaplin's teenage second wife spelt out in divorce papers how the world's best-loved film actor seduced her while she was underage, got her pregnant, then cheated on her with a series of young starlets. Lita Gray, the exotic, slow-eyed beauty who began acting with Charlie Chaplin when she was just a child, became pregnant by him when she was 15, married him at 16, and then divorced him 2 years later. The split resulted in what was then the world's largest divorce settlement of $825,000. Lita Gray was an American silent motion picture actress and wife to famous actor Charlie Chaplin. Lita Louise McMurray was born in Hollywood on April 15, 1908. She shared mixed European parentage origins. Her father came from Scottish immigrants, while her maternal side was of Spanish origin. The Spanish side of her family came from Andalusia in southern Spain. They settled in California when it was still part of Spanish America. She grew up in the pomp and colour of Hollywood. Lita met Chaplin at the age of 6 at a local restaurant in Hollywood. 6 years later, she met him again through a mutual friend. At the time, Chaplin was casting in the film The Kid that was released in 1921. She expressed interest in acting in the film, and Chaplin organised for her inclusion. Lita got a minor role as an angel who dangled from suspended wires as if gliding on air. The scene set of a heavenly environment received positive applause. Lita started her accidental acting career on a high note. The movie, notoriously, includes a dream sequence where the exhausted tramp falls asleep in his front doorway and is visited by an angel who flirts with him. The angel was played by the then barely 12-year-old Lita McMurray. Aged 15, McMurray later approached Chaplin when he was doing screen tests for his latest movie, The Gold Rush, and got the part of the female lead. She took the stage name suggested by Chaplin, Lita Gray. They began a flirting relationship off the cast. By this time, Lita was 15 years and almost 20 years younger than Chaplin. In 1925, Lita got another chance to cast in her second movie. She had an affair with Chaplin during the cast and became pregnant. When the pregnancy became visible, Chaplin replaced her with another actress, Georgia Hale. Chaplin offered her money to procure an abortion and avoid a scandal. Lita refused, and her family threatened to either kill him or ruin his career. Chaplin faced a prison term for having carnal knowledge of a minor if discovered. He obliged for marriage to save his face and career. He secretly married her in a discreet wedding ceremony in Sonora, Mexico. She gave birth to 2 sons, Charlie Chaplin Jr. and Sidney. Chaplin Jr. died of alcoholism in 1968. Sidney went on to have an acting career like his parents. The forced marriage failed from the start. Lita stayed alone in the house as Chaplin spent days working on the films, The Gold Rush and The Circus. After the films were produced, Chaplin continued staying away from his matrimonial home for days without informing his wife of his whereabouts. In 1926, Lita filed for a divorce. In her list of complaints, she threatened to name the 5 women who had an affair with Chaplin in public. 5 illustrious careers and their film production houses were under threat of censorship for promoting unethical behaviour. Under pressure, Chaplin agreed to settle the matter amicably. Charlie Chaplin's teenage wife, Lita Gray, described in Bombshell divorce papers how the movie icon seduced her while she was underage, got her pregnant, and made degrading demands. The papers claim Chaplin tried to force Gray to have an abortion, but she refused. An original copy of the 1927 divorce papers filed by Gray has emerged, the Times of London reports. The 50-page document, discovered in an abandoned bank in LA, includes claims that Chaplin first seduced the actress when she was 15 and he was 35. In the documents, she describes his revolting and inhumane treatment of her. He was told they would be thrown away and he kept them instead. When the papers were published, Chaplin was ostracised for a while. In the papers, Gray reveals that she was forced to perform sexual acts that were illegal in California during the 1920s, and that Chaplin demanded that his teenaged wife take part in a romantic interaction with another woman. Seeing her reluctance to participate, Chaplin, she claimed, had shouted at her, "All married people do those kinds of things. You are my wife, and you have to do what I want you to do." With such details of his perverted sexual desires leaking to the press, calls for his films to be banned grew. Chaplin and his crew reputedly smuggled the negatives out of California in coffee cans and undertook the editing of the film in a hotel room in Salt Lake City, Utah, while the divorce proceedings progressed. As a result of the notoriety, Chaplin negotiated the fees for the movie upwards prior to its release. The marriage was a disaster, and worse for Chaplin, with a sensational divorce. After a grueling 9 months of court battling, Lita finally got a divorce on August 22, 1927. She received a sum of $6 million as her settlement claim. In addition to that, she got $100,000, albeit in trust, for each of her 2 sons. It became the biggest settlement figure in the US then. The proceedings dented the image of actor Charlie Chaplin. In response, the film industry shunned Lita from getting any acting role in Hollywood. Lita turned to television acting. She did appear in 7 television productions between 1933 and 1983. Lita invested her newfound wealth in a nightclub and recreational facility. She spent much of her fortune on refurbishing the building, buying costumes for the entertainers, and paying musicians. In a rash decision, she purchased a house in the leafy suburb of Beverly Hills. With the club investment not returning any profitable income, Lita gradually fell into a financial crunch. After the acrimonious divorce, Lita married again thrice. In November 1936, she married Henry Aguirre. The couple divorced 2 years later in early 1938. On July 8, 1938, she got married again to Arthur Day. She lived in New York with her new husband until their divorce a decade later. With Day, Lita got a single child. On September 22, 1956, she became Mrs. Patsy Pizzalongo. Coincidentally, she divorced her 4th husband after a decade, just like in her 3rd marriage. However, while the court-ordered settlement cost Chaplin nearly $16 million in today's money, it didn't end his career. Innovative and revealing, The Kid lives up to Chaplin's own preface to the movie. A picture with a smile, and perhaps a tear. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the marriage of Lita Gray and Charlie Chaplin?